Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, today I bring before you a development that is as startling as it is revealing. The announcement of a Pakistan-Saudi deal involving Bagram Airbase, once the stronghold of U.S. military power in Afghanistan, now reportedly under China's influence, is shaking the very foundations of global geopolitics. And as if the situation were not tense enough, former President Donald Trump has gone so far as to threaten a strike, a move that exposes not only the fragility of U.S. foreign policy, but also the deeper crisis of capitalism in our time. Think about what this means. Bagram Airbase was once a symbol of American dominance in the region, a hub from which wars were launched and empires projected their might. Now, in a twist of history, it finds itself at the center of a new axis, Pakistan and Saudi Arabia aligning in a deal that opens doors for Chinese control. This is more than a military maneuver. This is about shifting economic power, the waning influence of Washington, and the rise of alternative blocs in the global order. And let us be clear, the United States response, embodied in Trump's threat of a strike, is not about security or defense. It is about fear, fear of losing control, fear of watching China and its partners create new pathways for trade, finance, and military cooperation that cut America out. When an empire feels its grip weakening, it lashes out. History has taught us this lesson again and again. But brothers and sisters, we must also understand the economics beneath the headlines. This is not only about bases and missiles. It is about resources, markets, and profits. American capitalism, with its hunger for expansion, has long relied on dominating regions like the Middle East and South Asia. But as global capitalism fractures, as nations like China build alternatives, and as alliances like Pakistan, Saudi gain traction, the United States is finding its old strategies failing. That is why threats of violence replace strategies of cooperation. The recent announcement of a Pakistan-Saudi deal that reportedly includes Bagram Airbase has sent shockwaves through the corridors of global power. For decades, Bagram was not just another military outpost. It was the crown jewel of America's military presence in Afghanistan, the very heart of Washington's war machine in the region. From this base, U.S. forces launched operations, conducted surveillance, and projected dominance across South and Central Asia. Now, the very same location appears to be entering a new chapter, one that pulls it into the orbit of Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and most importantly, China. This shift is not only symbolic, it is strategic, and it carries implications far beyond the mountains of Afghanistan. Why does this matter so much? Because power is not just measured in bombs or bases, it is measured in alliances, in control of choke points, and in influence over strategic assets. Bagram was once the emblem of American supremacy. Today, the suggestion that it could be linked to a Pakistan-Saudi arrangement, while China quietly consolidates control, is a sign that the unipolar world, dominated by Washington, is breaking apart before our very eyes. Every global power struggles to secure footholds that allow them to project influence. And in this case, the symbolism could not be more powerful. What was once U.S. territory in practice is now slipping into the hands of America's chief rival. And here is the hook This is not just a military shift, it is a historic reversal of empire. For 20 years, Bagram represented Washington's claim that it could shape the future of Afghanistan and, by extension, South Asia. Today, that claim rings hollow. With China's Belt and Road Initiative stretching across the region, with Pakistan acting as Beijing's long-time partner, and with Saudi Arabia looking east for economic cooperation, the base stands as a pivot point for a new balance of power. To put it plainly, what was once an asset of American dominance may soon become a cornerstone of China's strategy to counterbalance U.S. hegemony. Consider how the United States must view this development. For Washington, the inclusion of Bagram in a Pakistan-Saudi framework feels like betrayal layered upon defeat. Betrayal because traditional partners in the Middle East are now entertaining arrangements that strengthen China's hand. Defeat because the U.S. military invested trillions of dollars, 2 decades of war, and countless lives in Afghanistan, only to see the jewel of its operations repurposed under new alliances. It is a bitter pill to swallow, and it helps explain the angry, almost desperate rhetoric now coming from figures like Donald Trump. Threats of strikes are not strategies. They are signs of weakness, a reflex when influence is slipping away. But we must also recognize how this resonates on the ground. For Pakistan, the deal is not merely about military bases, it is about asserting autonomy, moving away from total dependence on Washington, and positioning itself as a bridge between the Gulf, Central Asia, and China. For Saudi Arabia, it represents hedging bets, diversifying alliances at a time when American reliability is increasingly in question. And for China, it is an extraordinary opportunity to turn symbolic presence into material leverage, securing both strategic depth and influence over trade corridors. In other words, Bagram is no longer a fortress of U.S. power. It is becoming a stage for the rise of multipolar geopolitics. This development also carries psychological weight. Think about it. Every headline about Bagram carries with it the ghosts of the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan. To hear today that the base may now fall under arrangements aligned with China is not just a shift in geography, it is a signal to the world that the tide has turned. For allies of the United States, it raises a chilling question. If America could lose its grip on Bagram, what else could it lose? And for those seeking to escape the shadow of U.S. dominance, the story is inspirational. It proves that empires do decline and alternatives can emerge. The deal, therefore, is not a local matter. It is not merely about Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. It is a reflection of the larger transformation underway in world politics, where U.S. supremacy is no longer guaranteed, where old alliances are questioned, and where China's influence grows not through military conquest, but through patient, calculated, strategic partnerships. That is why Bagram's fate has become more than a story of a base. It has become a metaphor for the shifting balance of power in the 21st century. When former U.S. President Donald Trump issued his warning of a potential strike in response to reports that Bagram Airbase could come under the umbrella of a Pakistan-Saudi deal with Chinese influence, it was more than just political theater. It was a reminder of how fragile American power has become in a rapidly shifting global order. Trump's threat, loud and unfiltered, tapped into a long-standing American reflex. When influence is slipping, reach for military rhetoric. But behind those words lies a deeper story, one of empire in decline, of rivals advancing, and of a political class struggling to mask weakness with bravado. Let us ask the question plainly: why would a former president and one who remains an influential figure in U.S. politics feel the need to issue a threat over Bagram? The answer is not hard to see. Bagram is not just a base, it is a symbol. For 2 decades, it embodied Washington's military dominance in Afghanistan and, by extension, the region. The idea that this very site could now fall under the sway of China, facilitated by Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, is humiliating for the American establishment. Trump's words were meant to project strength, but they revealed insecurity. Because when you have real power, you don't need to shout about it. You exercise it quietly. When you don't, you raise your voice and threaten strikes. And here is where the hook lies. Trump's threat is not merely about military action, it is about sending a signal to multiple audiences. To his domestic base, it says, I will not allow America to be humiliated. To America's allies, it suggests, stay in line, or Washington may turn its weapons not only on its enemies, but against those who break away. And to rivals like China, it conveys desperation, a warning that the United States, even in retreat, is still capable of dangerous escalation. In this way, Trump's words are both an admission of decline and a threat of destructive resistance to that decline. It is important to note the timing and context. America's foreign policy has been under strain for years. Endless wars drained public trust, economic crises at home undermined the promise of prosperity, and new powers emerged to challenge U.S. dominance. Against this backdrop, Trump's warning appears less like a carefully calculated strategy and more like an emotional outburst rooted in fear of irrelevance. The very idea that Bagram could slip away, that it could become a node in a network led by China and supported by Muslim majority allies, once firmly in Washington's camp, strikes at the heart of America's self-image as the indispensable nation. The threat of a strike is not only about military possibilities, it is about defending a narrative of superiority. That reality is fast eroding. Yet the danger cannot be dismissed. Threats, once spoken, can take on a life of their own. In the volatile world of geopolitics, a single misstep, a single miscalculation can transform words into war. Trump's statement plants the seed of escalation, a reminder to the world that America's decline will not necessarily be peaceful. Empires rarely exit the stage quietly. They rage, they fight, and they often leave destruction in their wake. The threat of a strike is therefore not just a rhetorical flourish. It is a warning of how violent the struggle to maintain power could become. For Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, Trump's words also serve as a test. Will they bow to the pressure, scale back their cooperation with China, and reassure Washington of their loyalty? Or will they press forward, betting that the future belongs not to a declining superpower, but to a rising one? This is the gamble of the moment. For China, Trump's reaction is both a challenge and an opportunity. It exposes America's unease, its willingness to brandish threats instead of strategies, and it allows Beijing to position itself as the calm, stable alternative in contrast to Washington's bluster. And then there is the psychological effect on the global audience. Trump's threat may inspire fear, but it also sparks curiosity and doubt. If the world's leading power is reduced to warning of strikes over a base it once controlled, what does that say about its trajectory? If America feels cornered, how far might it go to preserve its crumbling dominance? These questions now hang over international politics, creating both uncertainty and urgency. The truth is that Trump's words illuminate the core contradiction of the present moment. The United States wants to appear unchallengeable, yet it is visibly challenged. It wants to project stability, yet it radiates instability through impulsive threats. It wants to reassure its allies, yet its behavior drives many of them to seek alternatives. And so, Trump's strike warning becomes a symbol of something larger, the twilight phase of empire when threats grow louder even as power slips further away. So where does this leave us? At a crossroads. On one side, we see the old system of empire and capitalism struggling to maintain dominance through war and intimidation. On the other, we see the emergence of new alliances seeking independence from that very domination. The question is not whether this struggle will shape the 21st century, it already is. The question is, will we learn from this moment? Will we demand a world built on cooperation, fairness, and true democracy in economics as well as politics? Or will we remain prisoners of the old cycles of empire and crisis? The answer, my friends, is not written in stone. It will be decided by the choices we make today. Thank you.